You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check us out on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and on Twitter at Rainier Ave Radio.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, your host, Tony B., and I will be with you for this special broadcast of the impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. Again, we do this weekly, been doing it since March 13th, and I'll tell you, I really did not think we would be looking at August and we would still be here talking about these same issues, and not only talking about the issues of the impacts of coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities, but still unsure about what the future holds during this coronavirus pandemic as we face uncertainty in whether schools will open, whether, again, these sports will be played. And at this point in time, there are some questions about, believe it or not, the election. One of the things that we will be discussing here today have to deal with the protests that took place. And so I'm putting this in the coronavirus mode because all of these things happened during this period of social unrest. The question brought to me by members of our community ultimately comes down to this: are Black Lives Matter protests being used for violence? Well, you can feel free, and if so, if you think so, then by whom? You can join this conversation if you'd like by giving us a call at 206-290-9685. That's 206-290-U5, YOU5. If you want to chime in on this conversation, we'd like to have your commentary and your comments as well. Are the Black Lives Matter protests being used for violence, and if so, by whom? Well, there has been evidence that shows that there have been far-right extremist groups that do infiltrate this and call violence. We know that historically in this country there have been provocateurs that have infiltrated organizations to cause disruption and violence. Here locally in Seattle, the protests that have been taking place, well, they morphed into a number of different causes. A lot of them had to do with defund the police, but they may have been for different reasons. Joining me on the program right now is activist Ruby Holland. Ruby, how are you?
I'm fine.
Good to have you.
How are you today?
Under the circumstances, Ruby, fantastic. And also joining us as Victoria Beach. Victoria, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I feel blessed, but there's lots of work to be done, so my head is spinning.
Understandable. And I want to start, Ruby, with you and your feelings about what's going on right now with the protests, with the violence, and for you in particular, what made you feel that this was a topic that needed to be discussed, and you reached out to a few different people to get perspectives on it?
Well, what's going on right now, I really don't know. I lived in Atlanta for 30 years, so I haven't been a part of the Seattle protest for a while. On May 29th, I think was the first big protest downtown, and Victoria Beach was taking some video with her camera, and I happened to look and see some people there, some white kids going into backpacks. All of a sudden, they start taking out spray cans and started spraying up the place and started just tearing up the place, all down by Nordstrom's and in that area. Mm-hmm. And then Omari Salisbury was following it, and all of a sudden, it seemed like the police steered them towards the International District and just let them go loose without any police activity, without anybody stopping them. And they just tore up those buildings there. And it was pretty shameful because those buildings had just been, the International District had just been through that racial thing right when COVID hit, and so they was doing pretty bad, and they was doing pretty bad from being closed. And then I think the group went right back up Fourth Avenue, destroying things in their wake. So, I was wondering who that was. Then lately I've been seeing, after protest, I've been seeing people destroying stuff on Broadway and on 12th Avenue. And, that's getting close to home. My thing is, we don't have a lot of shops left in the CD. We don't have any place to shop. Our neighborhood's been so tore up. And at some point, these businesses that keep getting pounded are going to just say, what the heck? And they're just going to take off, And so that's what led me to want to have this discussion.
All right. And we'll continue this. Victoria, let me bring you in again in your response to this. Are Black Lives Matter protests being used for violence? And if so, by whom? And what makes this something that you feel needs to be shared, discussed, talked about, taken a look at?
Our movement has definitely been hijacked by, and I don't know who they are, anarchists or whoever. And my concern is, every protest that has been put on by the Black community has been peaceful. So it clearly isn't us. And what I'm told is that they join in with our protest, but then when we're done, they break off and then they start tearing up the place. Why aren't the community leaders that are marching with them or allowing these fools to march with them? Why aren't they confronting them? When I see them, I'm not even in the march. I confront them. They came down my block. I mean, literally, I'm on the corner of my block a week ago Sunday, and I was videotaping, and one of the white protesters came up to me and had the nerve to tell me not to videotape and turn the other way because it could get them in trouble. And I had to let her know, not on my block, and how dare you approach a Black woman and tell her what she can't do. They tried to block me, and as Ruby said, it's close to home. Well, it was literally on my block. I watched them start fires. They're not. They have a whole different agenda. Their agenda is violence, and we don't roll like that. So, and I feel like there is division in our community. That's what I really wanted to talk about. Why are we allowing them to make a mockery out of us? And they have a whole different agenda than us. It has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. It has nothing to do with the murder of George Floyd. I want them out of my community. Go do that somewhere else, but not here. And as a Black community, we need to stand up to them.
You're listening to our special impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities show. Again, the question: are Black Lives Matter protests being used for violence? If so, by whom? My guest joining me again, Victoria Beach is a chair of the African American Community Advisory Council, and also Ruby Holland, you may remember, joined us on our predatory buying show, activists in the community. So let's start with this. Let's set this ground. And Victoria, you made it fairly clear where you were coming from, because you said yes. The Black Lives Matter movement has been not only co-opted. And Ruby, I want to hear from you, and I want to start with that. Are we looking at something different now with these protests? Has the messaging been changed? If you feel so, there are still folks out there protesting for Black Lives Matter, and that's what you hear about, and you're hearing about again from a lot of folks, allyship. And I've even heard from folks about that this time there is more participation, they're saying, than during the civil rights movement in the 60s from white folks, and that is welcomed. And it's just a matter of how do white folks get the message about creating good allyships as part of this movement. So I want to go back to you again now, both of you, and have you comment on this. Regarding, in your opinion, the Black Lives Matter protests, have they been co-opted? And I'm going to say the same questions. If so, by whom, and why do you think that is? Ruby, you want to start?
I think, well, the protests in Portland, I think, were probably more co-opted than the ones here in Seattle. I mean, because once the wall of moms took over, then the wall of dads, then the wall of veterans, then it became about that. And of course, when, Trump had sent his people in, so it actually became more about, not so much Black Lives Matter, but about defending our rights from Trump. So it was totally co-opted in Portland. I haven't been able to keep up with what's going on in Seattle as much because I've been, off and on out of town. But I do know that this group that pops up whenever, the Black Lives Matter have a protest, I don't think they have any agenda other than just to tear things up and destroy things. My feeling is, somebody's got to know who these people are, because I've heard that they've been coming down here quite a bit every year after year since the World Trade, the WTO. And, I think that Jenny Durkins, Holmes, and, they just allow these white guys to do anything in this community and without consequence. That's my concern.
And Victoria, let me again get you to chime on this. As you mentioned before, you've said very strongly that yes, Black Lives Matter protests have been co-opted and the messaging has been changed. Tell me again your thoughts on that and why, and if you think there is an agenda in place.
Yeah, it definitely has been co-opted. I think part of their agenda is to take the focus off of Black Lives Matter in a slick, subtle way, and I wish I knew who these people were. And I'm not saying we don't want white people to protest, but you know what? Take our lead. Don't you lead us. Let us lead you, and I also, the Black community, we need to come together. We're divided. I've heard some of the communities say, we want them to tear the place up, burn it down. We're not about that. I mean, it's going to get us nowhere. And I don't want them burning down where I live. Maybe you want that in your neighborhood, but it's not going to solve anything. I also heard that a lot of these people were not even from Seattle. So we're letting them take over. We have to stop this. We have got to stop this. And I had a meeting today. We're in the works of getting people together to show that we want them out of here. And the thing is, they were arrested, but then they're let out. And I feel, if it was reversed, if they were all Black, there's no way they'd be let out. The book would be thrown at them. The whole focus is lost. We're going in so many different directions, and I want to get back on the murder of George Floyd and all the other people that have been murdered. I feel like we have an opportunity right now where I felt like we had the world protesting with us. I don't want to lose our moment.
Yeah, Tony, I'd like to speak on that. From what I've seen, the majority of the white people that are participating with us, I mean, it is just phenomenal. I appreciate them, and they are sincere about carrying our message and keeping the focus on our message. It's just this other little group that just runs in there from I don't know where, and all of a sudden they start destroying things, they tear up things. And but they have nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. They're not protesting with all the white people, the dear white people that are helping our cause, really, and that are showing up every day. This other group is just there to, tear up stuff. So I don't want to think for a minute that we don't appreciate the ones that are helping us, that are working with us, and that are really keeping this movement going.
So what do you feel should be done? I think one of the things that we're trying to do right here is at least bring to light what you're talking about. See if there are other people who feel this way. See what other folks' thoughts are. We know things are taking place. We know that there have been situations that people have referred to as rioting and violence. I remember being down at the downtown during the WTO, what eventually became known as the Battle of Seattle, and
Hmm.
at that time, again, there wasn't the ability to have all of the cell phones so that everyone could capture all of the information. And working for a major media market company, being down there, and I watched things unfold. I watched a very organized effort where downtown, essentially, there were people down there peaceful, and then I began to see garbage cans being dragged onto certain streets and garbage dumpsters, and it was very intentional. And then lit on fire, and barricades were set up, and before you knew it, um, who are at the time, I think now we're calling them anarchists, had set up a zone where they would block out the police, and then they immediately started breaking windows on some of the downtown businesses. Now, at that point, a mob mentality developed. But we didn't have the same type of coverage that we do today, where people really got to see how this thing unfolded and what happened. Um, what is your suggestion from both of you? And Victoria, I heard you mention that maybe the black leaders of these protests need to take some sort of action. Is it their responsibility? Who becomes responsible at that point, and what should be done? And I'd like to hear from both of you. And maybe you don't know, and that's fine. Right now, it's just part of the conversation of bringing this to light. But Victoria, I will start with you.
I think it is our our responsibility as a Black community. We're fighting for something. We want to be heard. We want things done, but we're not being heard because somebody has hijacked and taken over. Whether we agree or not, we have to also come to know that we have to agree to disagree and try to come together, you know, in a spot where we can continue to make our change. Absolutely, we have got to confront these, whatever they are and wherever they come from, and tell them to leave. We don't want them protesting with us. I mean, we have been peaceful. When the other thing I wanted to mention, they're they want to march for us, but they come in a violent way, carrying sledgehammers, poles, explosives. You don't see the Black community doing that, and we have to come together. We have to meet, and we're our own worst enemies. Everybody wants to be a leader, and there's fighting among us. Like I said before, this is our opportunity. I don't want to lose it. And I'm going to do everything I can in my power to keep exposing these people that don't want to be exposed, and trying to plan meetings for us to come together and make a plan.
And Victoria, what you're talking about here is this is you're saying this is your firsthand experience, things that you have seen. You were there, and again, if you want to, you said on near your home, you were filming, and there was someone who was white who asked you, or told you to stop filming.
Right. Even had the nerve to try to block me, and then two other white men joined in with her, and I literally had to shove them out of my face, and they backed off when they knew I wasn't playing around. But and then like Ruby said, I was downtown that the first day, and I have so much videotape of them breaking Nordstrom windows, tagging, also spray painting Black Lives Matters, and I wanted, the reason why I videotaped, and I felt like I put myself in danger, was I want people to see that it was not our Black community, because that's what people would, I knew they were going to blame us, and I wanted to show, no, it wasn't our people, it was yours.
Well, I'm
So
sure you're aware that the national narrative is just that. And when our president's talking about it and the things that you see, the question was the violent protests, and it was, of course, being blamed on black protesters. And for you, this is a narrative that you saw coming, Victoria. And why do you think that there hasn't been more reaction to this, or more introspection into what's taking place here in regards to the violence that, again, started out as Black Lives Matter protests in response to the murder of George Floyd. And I'm going to get to you here in a second, Ruby. But Victoria, again, because this for you is firsthand experience, you have tapes of this. You said, I know how this is going to go down. Why do you think that there hasn't been more conversation, or even more specifically, along with the co-opting of this, more interest from the other groups about preventing this from happening within the ranks of those who are protesting?
Because they're white. That's why. Because they're white. You know, you notice how the media focus on when in other states where there are Black protesters that are burning stuff and rioting. But you know what? I feel like, I know a lot of people will probably disagree with this. The reason why they're doing that is because of the pent up rage, and for years that the stuff that we've been through. So I get it. I get it when we're doing stuff like that. But the whites that are here, they don't know how we feel or what we've been through. So they're not doing it because they feel the way we do. They're doing it because they just want to jump on our movement and be destructive and take the light off of us and put it on them.
And Ruby, I want you to go ahead and follow up with your response to that as well.
Well, I agree with Victoria that our community needs to get more involved, and our community leaders need to get more involved. I'm not saying they should be down there at the protest, because I don't think, a lot of them just aren't physically capable of being down there. But, and I do think that the reason not as much has been being done is because I don't think anybody knows what to do. They jump up there, it's really quick, just like lightning, and they tear something up, then they're gone. But I think it's almost like the city allows this because, a lot of people, like you said, have videos, have photos, have pictures. I think they need to take them all, send them all to Jenny Durkin, send them to Pete Holmes, and, tell them, you need to pick these people up. And I think the community needs to get behind that, because it's probably the same people been doing it year after year after year. And like you said, it is coordinated. There's no way they could all jump out and just start tearing up things and then they're all gone. It's very coordinated. And, I'm almost wondering if Jenny Durkins and Holmes and all of them guys doesn't have this set up so that no protest could actually get, so that all protests could really be infiltrated. They know who these people are. They have to, after all this time, but yet they don't do anything about it. Just like they allow the, homeless drug addicts, white, to sell drugs and to openly and to buy drugs downtown. But when it was Blacks doing that, some of us still have prison sentences, not allowed to vote because of that. So, there's certainly some racism going on in here, and they're allowing these young white guys to tear these buildings up. And like Virginia said, if it was Blacks running around with baseball bats and sledgehammers tearing up these windows, protest after protest, they'd still be in jail. So, I think the Black community needs to put the pressure on them guys downtown and tell them, you guys need to stop these people from coming in here on these protests. They're not up to no good. They just want to destroy and defeat. And the way them guys ignore them, and so have been ignoring them for so long, it just really makes me think that they got a stake in that.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. It's me, Tony B. My guests Again, Victoria Beach, chair of the African American Community Advisory Council, and community activist Ruby Holland. Our discussion is has the Black Lives Matter movement been co-opted and being used for indiscriminate violence? We know at this point that the Black Lives Matter movement that started out in a response to the murder of George Floyd is now inclusive of a number of different issues and concerns, many of them around defund the police, but no longer solely focused on the murder of George Floyd and the systemic oppression, that Black people have faced along with police brutality, which is how this started out, and that's what got the world's attention. My guests again here, I want to give you, first of all, thank you for coming on and voicing your opinion and sharing this information. It's a lot of times easy to say things and hide behind the safety of social media, but it's another to get out and say, hey, this is what I think, and then also you've put some of this responsibility on the members of our community as well, and we'll see how that holds up. I want to give both of you the opportunity for final words here before we go. And Ruby, I'll start with you because you were the one who presented this topic for conversation.
Well, I just wanted to stop, and I know it probably can stop if the powers that be took this seriously, as seriously as Victoria and I and some others in the community have been, talking about this. Nothing has been done. Like I said, I don't think anybody really knows what to do because it's been going on for so many years. But, it's time to say, we're tired of it, and it needs to stop.
All right. And also, Victoria Beach, final thoughts and final words from you.
I totally agree with Ruby. Enough is enough. We have to take our movement back. Another person I feel like we need to get rid of is Sawant. She also riles them up. I think some of them are her people. She gets them going, and she has a hidden agenda. She's not for the Black community. We have to hold people accountable. We need to come together. Our Black community, we need to come together and stop this. We're the only ones, I think, that can stop it because it doesn't look like we're getting any help anywhere else. I'm going to stay out there, even if I have to be on the front lines. I'm careful with the mask. And if you're protesting, believe me, I'm going to videotape you. Nobody's going to silence me. So I'm going to continue to do my part.
My guests again, Ruby Holland and Victoria Beach, thank you for joining me here on Rainier Avenue Radio. You know how we get down. We want to make sure that your narrative shared, your voice is amplified. And we'll be back again to continue our conversation that we have every Friday about the impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. Marty Griswold from One Real will be here along with Steve Severin, owner of Numos and a couple of other clubs. Conversation is going to be about Save Our Stages, which is the Save Our Stages Act, which is being proposed. I'll tell you more about that. We'll talk with Marty about it. We'll talk with Stephen about it. We'll be back right after this break.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
If you're an older adult or someone of any age with underlying medical conditions, you're at a higher risk for severe illness from COVID-19. Look, the good news is there are steps you can take to protect yourself and loved ones. Wash your hands often. Stay home unless you need food, medicine, or medical care. If you need to go out, stay at least 6 feet away. Avoid people who are sick and make a plan. Identify and talk with someone who can help care for you if you get sick. Have supplies like medicine and groceries on hand, or find ways to have them brought to you. And remember, wear a cloth face covering when around others. For more information, call Seattle King County Public Health at 206-477-3977. That's 206-477-3977.